One of the most surprising stories behind the horror film Obsession is that its director, Curry Barker, did not rise through the traditional Hollywood system at all. Instead, he built his filmmaking career by uploading videos to YouTube, where millions of viewers discovered his work before the movie industry did. In fact, one of his short films exploded online with more than 9 million views, and that viral success helped launch him directly into directing a theatrical feature film. Today, we are diving deep into Obsession, from the unexpected origin of the story to the casting decisions, production challenges, and the fascinating creative ideas that shaped one of the most talked-about horror breakouts to emerge from the Toronto International Film Festival. Stick around, because once you learn how this film was made and the hidden meanings behind some of its most important elements, you may never watch it the same way again. And before we get into the story behind the movie, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment telling me your favorite psychological horror film. Your support helps this channel keep bringing you deep dives into the movies you love. At its core, Obsession is built on a deceptively simple idea. A lonely young man makes a wish for the girl he loves to fall in love with him. The wish comes true. But what he gets is not love. What he gets is something far darker. The story follows Bear, a young man who has been secretly in love with his best friend Nikki for years. Bear is the kind of character audiences immediately recognize. He is shy, awkward, and deeply unsure of himself. For a long time, he has carried feelings for Nikki, but has never found the courage to confess them. One night, he decides that he is finally going to change that. While searching for the perfect gift for Nikki, Bear wanders into a crystal shop where he notices a strange item called the One Wish Willow. The object looks like a novelty trinket, something you might find in a joke shop or tucked away in the corner of a mystical boutique. According to its packaging, the stick grants the holder a single wish. All you have to do is spark the middle and snap it in half. Bear does not take the idea seriously at first. It seems like a harmless curiosity. But later that night, when he finally finds himself alone in his car after failing to confess his feelings to Nikki, he decides to try it. In a moment of frustration and vulnerability, Bear snaps the stick and says the words that change everything. He wishes that Nikki loves him more than anyone else in the world. At first, nothing appears to happen, but then something changes. Nikki suddenly becomes intensely devoted to Bear, not just affectionate or romantic, but obsessively attached to him in a way that feels unsettling. Her emotions grow more extreme with every passing moment, and the more Bear realizes what he has unleashed, the more terrifying the consequences become. Friends begin to notice something is wrong. Nikki's behavior becomes increasingly disturbing, and Bear slowly realizes that what he thought was a harmless wish has warped the person he cares about into something else entirely. In other words, Bear gets exactly what he asked for, and that turns out to be the worst possible outcome. This twisted exploration of desire and control is exactly what attracted writer and director Curry Barker to the story. Barker has explained that he wanted to explore the idea of obsession and how easily something that looks like love can turn into something unhealthy or destructive. He was fascinated by the question of where the line between love and obsession actually lies. The film deliberately avoids giving the audience easy answers. Instead, it places viewers in a morally uncomfortable position. Bear is not simply a hero or a villain. He is flawed, selfish, vulnerable, and desperate for validation. And that complexity is intentional. Barker wanted audiences to leave the theater arguing about the choices the characters make and wondering how they themselves might behave in a similar situation. That psychological tension is what elevates Obsession beyond a traditional horror movie. But before Barker ever directed a theatrical film, he had a very different kind of career. Long before Hollywood came calling, Barker and his collaborator Cooper Tomlinson built a following on YouTube through their comedy sketch brand called That's a Bad Idea. Their videos attracted a loyal audience and allowed them to experiment with storytelling and filmmaking techniques. Eventually, Barker began directing narrative projects online, including a short film titled The Chair. The film became a viral hit, drawing millions of views and attracting attention from industry professionals who were impressed by how cinematic the work looked despite its modest resources. That success opened the door to Barker's first feature film, Milk and Cereal, which he created with an incredibly small budget and released independently on YouTube. The project became a cult success online. For many filmmakers, that kind of grassroots momentum would be the dream scenario. But for Barker, it was only the beginning. One of the people who noticed Barker's work was veteran producer James Harris. Harris had spent years producing successful genre films, including titles like 47 Meters Down and The Strangers, Pray at Night. When Harris saw Barker's short film The Chair, he immediately recognized the talent behind it. He later explained that he was blown away by how cinematic the short looked and by how clearly Barker understood the mechanics of horror storytelling. Harris described Barker as someone who instinctively understood not only how to scare an audience, but also how to create emotional depth within a genre film. Initially, Harris considered adapting The Chair into a feature film, but then Barker pitched a different idea. That idea was Obsession. As soon as Harris heard the concept, he knew it was the stronger project. The story felt modern, psychologically sharp, and perfectly suited to the current wave of elevated horror films that combine emotional storytelling with disturbing concepts. Producer Christian Mercury also responded immediately to the screenplay. He was particularly impressed by the tone of the script, which managed to balance genuine horror with moments of humor and humanity. That blend of tones would ultimately become one of the film's defining characteristics. But the deeper inspiration for the story actually came from an unexpected source, an episode of The Simpsons. Barker once saw an episode in which Bart Simpson buys a monkey's paw, a mythical object that grants wishes, but always twists them in horrifying ways. The idea of combining a wish-granting device with the concept of obsession sparked something in Barker's imagination. What if a wish did not simply backfire? What if it forced someone to experience their fantasy in the most disturbing way possible? That question became the foundation of the film. The more Barker developed the idea, the more he realized that the horror would work best if the characters felt completely real. Instead of placing the story in a supernatural fantasy world, he grounded it in ordinary locations and everyday relationships. This approach allows the horror to creep in slowly. At first, the story feels like a romantic drama. Then the tone shifts. Then the situation becomes uncomfortable, and finally the psychological tension erupts into full-blown terror. To bring this story to life, Barker assembled a small but talented cast led by Michael Johnston as Bear and Inde Navarrete as Nikki. Johnston was an especially interesting choice for the lead role. Before Obsession, Johnston had already built a diverse career across television, film, and voice acting. He gained early recognition for his role on the hit series Teen Wolf, and he later appeared in shows such as Supergirl, SWAT, and The In-Between. But what made Johnston perfect for Bear was not simply his acting resume. It was his ability to embody the complicated emotional contradictions within the character. Bear begins the film as someone who appears gentle and innocent, but as the consequences of his wish unfold, his choices become increasingly morally questionable. Johnston described the character in a striking way. Bear knows there is a monster under the bed, but he refuses to look because he desperately wants his fantasy to be real. That psychological denial is what drives the entire film. And opposite Johnston, the role of Nikki required an equally challenging performance. Because Nikki's transformation over the course of the film is dramatic and unsettling. At the beginning, she is a normal young woman with her own personality and independence. But once Bear's wish takes effect, her emotions spiral into something extreme. Inde Navarrete embraced that challenge immediately. When she first read the script, she said she understood Nikki instantly and felt a powerful connection to the character. That level of clarity allowed her to dive into the role with confidence from the very first day of filming. In fact, the very first scene Navarrete shot turned out to be one of the most intense moments in the film. And according to Barker, the first take of that scene was so powerful that it ended up in the final movie. That moment convinced the entire production team that they had found the perfect actress for the role. As production on Obsession began, Curry Barker suddenly found himself stepping into a completely different world than the one he was used to. Up to that point, much of his filmmaking experience had come from working with small crews, limited resources, and a do-it-yourself mentality. He had spent years making films with friends, learning how to tell stories with whatever tools were available. Now he was walking onto a professional film set for the first time as the director of a theatrical feature. and the scale of it all hit him immediately. Barker later recalled arriving at the house location that would serve as one of the film's primary settings and seeing dozens of people working together to transform the space. Painters were changing the walls. Crew members were setting up camera equipment. Set decorators were installing wallpaper and dressing the environment. For a moment, he stood there, taking it all in. All of this work was happening for the movie he had imagined. It was overwhelming. But something interesting happened once filming actually began. After Barker called action on the first day and completed a few takes, the anxiety started to disappear. He realized that despite the larger scale, the process was fundamentally the same as the films he had been making since he was a kid. At its core, directing a movie is still about working with actors, telling a story, and capturing the right moments on camera. That realization helped him settle into the role. The production schedule was intense. The film had only 20 days to shoot everything, which meant the cast and crew had to work quickly and efficiently. For many directors, a limited budget and a tight schedule might feel like restrictions, but Barker actually sees those limitations as creative advantages. He has explained that having fewer resources forces a filmmaker to focus on the most important elements of the story. When you cannot do everything, you are forced to be inventive, and that inventiveness became a defining part of Obsession. One of the most distinctive stylistic choices Barker made was the way he used the camera. Unlike many horror films that rely on rapid editing and quick cuts, Barker preferred to let scenes unfold in long takes. Instead of constantly cutting between different angles, he allowed the camera to remain with the characters for extended periods of time. This approach creates a sense of realism and tension. When a scene continues without interruption, the audience feels trapped inside the moment with the characters. There is no relief from the escalating discomfort. Barker also made a deliberate decision about perspective. The entire film is essentially experienced through Bear's point of view. The camera rarely shows information that Bear himself does not see. This keeps the audience locked inside his psychological experience as the consequences of his wish spiral out of control. One particularly ambitious sequence involves the moment Bear makes his wish and the emotional conversation that follows when Nikki returns to the car. The scene is long and emotionally layered. Nikki opens up about deeply personal issues, including the death of her father, and the interaction between the characters unfolds in real time. Barker deliberately allowed the scene to linger. He wanted the audience to sit inside the discomfort, to feel the tension building between the characters as the story begins to shift into darker territory. The entire sequence was shot during an overnight filming session and spanned 9 pages of dialogue. For the cast and crew, it was an exhausting day. But the results helped establish the slow-burning tone that defines the film. Of course, not every scene went smoothly. Like many horror productions, Obsession included moments that required complicated practical effects. One of the most difficult scenes involved the death of the character Sarah. The moment required a stunt involving a car and a window made of candy glass, the type of breakable material often used in film productions to simulate shattered glass safely. The art department prepared 3 candy glass windows for the scene. That should have been enough. But almost immediately, things began to go wrong. The first window shattered before filming even began. While members of the art department were carrying it toward the car, it broke in their hands. That left 2 windows. The crew carefully installed the second one and began filming the scene. But during the take, a large piece of styrofoam unexpectedly fell into the frame of the shot. The footage was unusable. Now the production was down to its final candy glass window. If the last attempt failed, there would be no way to complete the scene that day. Everyone on set knew the pressure was enormous. The third and final window was installed. The cameras rolled, and this time, everything worked. The glass shattered exactly as planned, the performance was perfect, and the take became the version used in the final film. It was one of those moments in filmmaking where everything comes down to a single shot. Fortunately, the team pulled it off. Beyond the action sequences and intense performances, one of the most fascinating aspects of Obsession is its production design. The environment of the film plays a major role in creating the unsettling atmosphere that surrounds Bear and Nikki. Production designer Vivian Gray focused heavily on Bear's house, which serves as one of the story's primary locations. According to the film's backstory, the house originally belonged to Bear's grandmother. After her death, Bear moved in and became the caretaker of the property. But instead of turning the house into his own space, Bear leaves much of it unchanged. The result is a home that feels strangely disconnected from its owner. The decorations, furniture, and style reflect an older generation, while Bear's personal items appear out of place within that environment. The filmmakers also made a point of shooting as many scenes as possible on real locations instead of sound stages. Several recognizable Los Angeles locations appear in the film. For example, the tavern scene in the movie is a real Burbank bar called the Roguelike Tavern. The shop where Bear discovers the mysterious One Wish Willow is a real North Hollywood store known as the Green Man Store. Using authentic locations helped ground the supernatural elements of the story in a believable world. But perhaps the most important piece of design in the entire film is the object that drives the plot forward: the One Wish Willow. This strange stick is the catalyst for everything that happens in the movie. Creating it required an unusual amount of thought and creativity. Barker initially researched many traditional wish-granting symbols while developing the concept. He looked into wishbones, wishing wells, shooting stars, and the classic monkey's paw legend. But none of those ideas felt unique enough. Eventually, he decided to invent an entirely new object. The first step in designing the One Wish Willow actually came from Barker's own family. He and his mother developed the initial concept together before handing the idea to the film's design team to refine. Production designer Vivian Gray and graphic designer Amy Vega began working on the object months before filming started. Interestingly, the box that contains the willow was designed before the stick itself. The team experimented with many different styles before settling on a shape that felt both mysterious and nostalgic. The final design resembles a three-sided box with angular lines that give it the appearance of a rare gemstone. It looks like something you might discover in an old novelty shop. That was exactly the intention. The design needed to feel innocent and harmless at first glance, because the darker implications of the object would only become clear later. Designing the willow itself required even more experimentation. Gray wanted the stick to feel like it came from a strange mythology, rather than simply being a random twig. To achieve that effect, she studied unusual organic shapes, including the skeletal remains of dried cactus plants. Those forms inspired the strange silhouette of the stick. The color was chosen carefully as well. Instead of using natural wood tones, the designers selected a neutral gray shade that makes the object feel slightly artificial and unsettling. White oval patterns were added along the surface of the stick. These shapes serve two purposes. Visually, they resemble the simplified shading often seen in old cartoon artwork, but they also create a clear pattern that can be easily recognized by the camera in dark scenes. Every element of the design was meant to create subtle unease. Even the way the stick snaps in half required a special mechanism, and the inspiration for that mechanism came from a childhood toy. Barker remembered a prank pen he used to play with when he was younger. The pen contained a small, spring-loaded mechanism that snapped suddenly when opened. The design team tracked down one of those pens and carefully disassembled it. A piece of that mechanism was then incorporated into the One Wish Willow prop. When the stick is pulled apart, the hidden spring inside causes it to snap back with a sharp motion. The effect creates a visual cue that signals the moment the wish has been activated. But the designers also wanted the experience of opening the box and removing the stick to feel suspenseful. There is a slight resistance when pulling the willow free, almost as if the object itself is asking a silent question. Are you sure you want to do this? That tiny moment of hesitation adds to the tension surrounding the object. Because once the wish is made, there is no going back. And as we will explore in the next part of this story, the impact of obsession did not end when filming wrapped. The movie went on to make a huge impression at one of the world's most important film festivals and quickly became one of the most talked-about horror acquisitions of the year. When filming on Obsession finally wrapped, the production team knew they had created something unusual. The film had been made quickly, on a relatively modest budget, with a young director making his first theatrical feature. But everyone involved could feel that the movie had a distinct identity. It blended psychological horror with dark humor. It explored uncomfortable emotional territory while still delivering shocking genre moments. And perhaps most importantly, It felt personal. For Curry Barker, the next challenge was one he had been both excited and nervous about from the beginning: editing the film. Most directors hand the editing process over to another filmmaker, but Barker made the unusual decision to edit the entire movie himself. This was not a small task. Editing a feature film requires months of careful work. Every cut, every pause, every transition can dramatically affect how a scene feels. For a horror movie in particular, timing is everything. A scare can fail or succeed depending on a fraction of a second. Barker admitted that taking on the editing job himself was intimidating. He had never edited a feature film of this scale before, but there was a reason he wanted to do it: control. By editing the movie himself, Barker could protect the exact tone he had envisioned while writing and directing the film. He understood the pacing of the scenes, the emotional rhythm of the performances, and the slow-burn tension he wanted to build throughout the story. Giving that responsibility to someone else might have changed the experience. So he took the risk, and in the end, it paid off. Once the film was completed, Obsession began making its way through the festival circuit, where it quickly caught the attention of audiences and industry professionals alike. The movie premiered in the Midnight Madness section of the Toronto International Film Festival, a category known for showcasing bold and exciting genre films. Midnight Madness has launched the careers of many filmmakers over the years, and the audience for those screenings is famously enthusiastic. When Obsession played for the first time, the reaction was exactly what the filmmakers had hoped for. Viewers laughed at the dark humor, gasped at the shocking moments, and leaned forward as the psychological tension built toward the film's disturbing conclusion. The movie quickly became one of the breakout titles of the festival, and that success led to a major moment for everyone involved. After the screening, the film was acquired by Focus Features in a deal reported to be worth more than $15 million. For a first-time theatrical director, that kind of acquisition is extraordinary. Barker himself could hardly believe what was happening. He later described the experience as surreal, recalling the moment when he realized that his life was changing in real time. One day, he was an independent filmmaker who had built his audience through internet videos. The next day, he was the director of a film that had just become one of the most talked-about sales at one of the biggest film festivals in the world. Industry veterans were equally impressed by what Barker had achieved. Jason Blum, the founder of Blumhouse Productions and one of the most influential producers in modern horror cinema, publicly praised the film and Barker's work behind the camera. Blum pointed out that Barker directed the film with the confidence of someone who had been making feature films for years, despite this being his first theatrical project. That kind of endorsement is a powerful signal within the film industry. It suggests that a new voice has arrived. Michael Johnston, who plays Bear, has spoken about the deeper meaning he sees in the story. To him, the film reflects how easily people can become blinded by their own desires when they are searching for validation or affection. Bear's wish reveals a painful truth about his character. He does not wish for Nikki to be happy. He does not wish for her to find love. Instead, he wishes for her devotion. That difference is crucial, because devotion implies ownership. It suggests that what Bear truly wants is not a relationship between two equal people, but a situation where he is the center of someone else's world. Behind the scenes, the film also benefited from the work of an experienced production team. Producer James Harris brought decades of genre filmmaking experience to the project. Over the years, he has worked on numerous successful horror and thriller films, helping guide productions through the unique challenges of the genre. Producer Christian Mercuri contributed an equally impressive background in film distribution and production. Throughout his career, he has been involved in hundreds of films, giving him a deep understanding of how to position a movie within the global marketplace. Together with producer Haley Johnson and executive producer Roman Viaris, the team helped support Barker's creative vision while ensuring the film could be completed within its budget and schedule. Cinematographer Taylor Clemens played a crucial role in shaping the film's visual language. His approach to cinematography focuses on capturing emotion through imagery. Instead of relying solely on dialogue to express what characters are feeling, Clemens uses lighting, framing, and movement to communicate the psychological state of the characters. This philosophy aligns perfectly with Barker's preference for long takes and character-focused storytelling. Together, They created a visual style that draws viewers into Bear's perspective while slowly revealing the growing darkness surrounding him. Some viewers see the film as a disturbing cautionary tale about the dangers of selfish desire. Others interpret it as a critique of modern dating culture, and some simply experience it as a thrilling psychological ride filled with shocking twists and unsettling moments. In many ways, that variety of reactions is exactly what Curry Barker hoped to achieve. He wanted people leaving the theater debating what they had just seen. Was Bear a victim of supernatural forces, or was he responsible for everything that happened? Was Nikki truly transformed by the wish, or did the wish simply reveal something that was already buried inside both of them? Those questions linger long after the final scene, and that lingering discomfort is part of what makes Obsession such a memorable film. As Barker continues his career in Hollywood, many people in the industry are watching closely to see what he will do next. If Obsession is any indication, his future projects are likely to combine bold ideas, emotional complexity, and the kind of inventive filmmaking that first caught audiences' attention online. For now, though, Obsession stands as an impressive debut on the theatrical stage. If Obsession is any indication, his future projects are likely to combine bold ideas, emotional complexity, and the kind of inventive filmmaking that first caught audiences' attention online. For now, though, Obsession stands as an impressive debut on the theatrical stage. A film that began with a YouTube filmmaker, a strange wish-granting stick, and a story about the terrifying consequences of getting exactly what you want. Sometimes the scariest horror stories are not about monsters. They are about human desire, and the moment when love turns into obsession. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the making of Obsession, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me what you think the film is really about.